chapter 20 through 22 this morning. So as I'm telling this story, you can grab, if you don't have a Bible, there's one there in the seat in front of you. So I'm there in Grants Pass, and I'll tell you, it was hot. Like really hot, like hundreds and hundreds degrees hot. And so I went down there. I knew that they had kind of a leak, and so I talked to, his name's Clarence. I said, Clarence, so what's the deal? And he's like, well, I got this leak, and it's a 3-tab shingle roof, but the pitch isn't enough to make the water run off, so the water's been running back. And so I'm like, he said he got a bid for it, and they wanted $20,000 to fix their roof. And I'm like, listen, it doesn't cost $20,000 to fix a roof. I don't know, unless you're like re-roofing Walmart. I think we're all right. And so he says, if you get the materials, we'll get some rolled roofing, we'll rip off those old 3-tab shingles, we'll put on some rolled roofing, it'll be good. And he's like, yeah, that'll be great. So I came down there, left on Tuesday, get down there. I pull into town in Grants Pass. So it's like 101, 102 degrees. It is blazing hot. I mean, little people are bursting into flames. I mean, just as you're poof, poof, it was so hot. And so we get there, and so I go to take off the roofing. So there's 3-tab shingles, and so I'm like, okay, this is pretty straightforward. So the shingles come off pretty easily. Rip off the shingles pretty good. And then I see that it's not just felt paper underneath, they have rolled roofing underneath the shingles that had been tarred, like somebody had poured tar all over it. And I'm like, now this is a 20 by 22 section, and I'm like, oh man. And now it's getting hot, by the way, at this point, right? And I don't know about you, but when I get hot, I get irritable. Does anybody get irritable when they get hot? I mean, like, oh, geez. And so, yeah, Michael loves it. She's like reptilian. She just like lays in the sun, you know. So I'm like, well, okay. And so I said, this is going to take a little longer than I thought, but I was just like, okay. So I pull this stuff off. There's another layer of rolled roofing. Except this rolled roofing has been nailed by someone with OCD. I'm telling you, the nails were literally 3/4 of an inch apart. All the way down, strips them every 3 feet. It looked like a zipper of nails down like this. And the problem was not just the nails, but that water had gotten underneath there, and so all the nails had rusted. So when you go to pop them up, the heads would pop off, so you couldn't get them out. So I'm there for hours on my hind end with a pair of pliers prying up each nail as I'm going down and back. And did I tell you it was hot? It was hot. It was hot. And so I'm sitting there as I'm doing this, and I'm thinking about Clarence, my grandpa, and thinking to myself, what, who, why, what is this? Had I known this, I would have just covered the whole thing back up, slapped some tar, and I go, hey, Clarence, you're set to go. You know, you're set to go. So I'm this whole thing, I'm prying this thing up, and I remember he came out at one point. This is funny. He came out. And he goes, hey, Mike, how's it going up there? And I say, hey, Clarence, I'm not really wanting to talk right now because because my attitude wasn't in a good spot because I was afraid what I was going to say to Clarence. I love this guy. He, respect your elders. I want to do that kind of a thing, but I don't know who talked him into this. So I finally, when I got down off the roof, I had to get some water and get down off the roof. And so I'm kind of got calmed down a bit. And he's like, so how's it going up there? I'm like, yeah, it's a bit unexpected. And but I just want to know, was there like a major sale on roofing nails? Like, did you get $10,000 for $1 or something? Because it is like packed. And he's like, well, I don't know who did that, which told me exactly I know who did that. Anyone says, I don't remember who did that. It was him. So anyways, that being said, it was a great week. We got it done. But anybody remember the old show, All in the Family? Everybody remember this show? I mean, I'm kind of dating myself. It was back during the days of George Jefferson and that whole group. Do you remember the old guy, Archie Bunker was his name, right? And he'd sit in that big cloth chair. And you remember what he used to call his son-in-law all the time? His son-in-law? Meathead! Meathead! He'd yell meathead. He had a cigar. There is no way in a million years that show would ever make it on television today. With all the stuff that and the Jeffersons, there's no way that would ever make it on the show. But it was one of those shows where they got this old guy that just yelled, and it was like the whole point of the show was family turmoil. That's what the whole show was about, was dysfunctional drama. And if you ever watch the Archie Bunker or the All in the Family show, oh, Edith, everybody has an Edith in their family, right? These were the days, and she's playing the piano. And so none of you, I got to come up with a better illustration. So I mean, it was all about this guy and the problems in the family. And if you watched it, you always felt better about your family because you're like, it could be worse. I could live with Archie Bunker. And I want to talk today about family a little bit. I want to talk about rough patches in families. See, Joshua and the nation of Israel has crossed over into the Promised Land. We're right at the back end in chapter 20 of the book of Joshua. And just by way of ramping up, we're working our way through the Bible. And the nation of Israel at this point, when we walked into Joshua at the beginning of the book, they were just about to cross over into the Promised Land, into the land of Palestine. But the Jordan River was there, and so the book of Joshua is how the nation of Israel not only crosses over into the land of the Canaanites, but actually conquers the Canaanites and takes ownership of the land. And so since we're on the back half of the book, we've gotten to the point where they have conquered the land. They conquered from the south. They conquered from the north. Joshua last week has allotted the land to all the tribes of Israel except one. One didn't get an inheritance. Which tribe was that? Anybody remember? The Levites. Well, that's going to come in today. We're going to find out what did the Levites get if all the other tribes got land. So they handed out all the land, and so now they're learning what it's like to live in peace, which isn't easy to do. Some of us live in an Archie Bunker way, an Archie Bunker family, an Archie Bunker life. Lots of drama. And we don't know what it's like to live with peace. It's almost like we have to have drama. We have to have war. These folks have been warring for the last 4 or 5 years now, getting the land, and now that they have it, how do they live knowing that they don't have to go to battle tomorrow? And so this is going to be a struggle for them, and this generation of Israelites are really going to struggle with this. So as we walk into 20, I want to kind of walk us into this a little bit. We're actually going to spend most of our time in 23, but I just want to kind of catch us up here a bit. So in chapter 20, if you turn in your Bibles there, Joshua chapter 20, you're going to find that we start with Joshua establishing what is called cities of refuge. After he's handed out all the land, there are certain cities within the land of Israel that are going to be called cities of refuge. Pick it up here, 20 verse 1. It says, "Then the Lord said to Joshua, tell the Israelites to designate the cities of refuge as I instructed you through Moses, so that anyone who kills a person accidentally or unintentionally may flee there and find protection from the avenger of blood." Okay, so there's going to be a number of cities that are set up. And these cities are places where there's normally a high priest living in that city. And people who had accidentally or unintentionally killed somebody would run to that city because who was chasing them? What's it say there? The avenger of what? Blood. The avenger of blood. Now, who do you think that would be? Who's the avenger of blood? It would be a family member, right? It'd be a family member. The illustration, this isn't the first time these cities come up, by the way. Mike Sweeney did an excellent job teaching on these, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on them today, but the illustration that's given earlier is like, let's say, for example, you're chopping wood and the axe head flies off of the handle and kills another person. Which, by that example, that must have happened. Who comes up with that example, right? I mean, that must have, somebody one day was just swinging their hand, all of a sudden, it's stuck in someone's head. Boom, dead. Well, here's the thing. You don't call 911. There is no dispatch. They don't call out CSI. There's nothing like that. There's just a bunch of people living. And so you just killed one of their kids, for example. Well, kids and family members are like commodities. They're workers. So if you kill somebody's worker, that means something, let alone the emotional connection we have here. So what would happen is people wouldn't know the situation. So you killed one of mine, I'm going to kill one of yours. And it goes back and forth like this, i.e. we're talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for the last how many thousands of years, right? You kill one of mine, I kill 10 of yours. You kill 10 of mine, I'll kill 100 of yours. And so that's what's going on back and forth. So the answer that God gave was this: if you accidentally or unintentionally kill someone, you need to drop what you're doing and book it to one of the cities of refuge. And that's what they would do. They would run, and the avenger of blood would chase after them. Now, this didn't mean that if you killed somebody that you were scot-free if you made it to home base. It's kind of like tag, right? It's not like if you make it there, nothing happens. You're going to get to the city, but there's going to be a trial. Take a look here, all the way down at verse 9. It says, any of the Israelites or any foreigner residing among them who killed someone accidentally, they could flee to these designated cities and not be killed by the avenger of blood prior to standing trial before the assembly. So, when they got there, what would ultimately happen? There'd be a trial. And it would be before the high priest. And what would happen is the high priest would look at the situation and someone would say, well, I didn't intentionally kill him. And the avenger of blood would show up and they'd have a trial. And sometimes it was shown, no, you did kill them intentionally and punishment was given. Or no, you didn't. But you still have to pay a fee. You still have to reimburse these folks. Because again, if you killed somebody, a child or whatever, that was a commodity that needed to be paid for. And so this was about, what God set up here was, I like to call it this. It's a city of sobriety. Because I'll tell you what, you go through trauma like that, you can imagine, you can understand why somebody would make a rash decision on how to get revenge. God says, something's got to be here to where we have time to process. Time to process what's going on. We get hurt, something happens. The city of refuge was not just to protect the person that unintentionally killed another. It was to protect the avenger of blood of doing something that they shouldn't do. This is for everybody's protection. You know, they say that the wheels of justice grind slowly. Some of that is intentional. Some of it is about letting things simmer down, letting the dust settle a bit. And then we have a better sense of exactly what happened, what went on, and what do we need to do. Okay? This might not be a bad way to consider our own personal life, right? Let things slow down. Okay? Let's let calm heads prevail. Now this is going to actually be a principle we're going to see peel over into chapter 23, okay? So let's go to, 22, but let's pick up 21 here now. So the cities of refuge are established. The second thing here is that Levites are given cities. Remember we said that they weren't given land as an inheritance, but they were given cities to live in. And so pick up 21:1, it says, now the family heads of the Levites approach Eleazar the priest, Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of the other tribal families of Israel at Shiloh in Canaan, and said to them, the Lord commanded through Moses that you give us towns to live in with pasture lands for our livestock. So what's going to happen is there's three basic clans that live amongst make up the Levitical tribe. And these three are the Kohathites, Gershom, and Merari. Those three clans are each going to, the first two are given 13 cities, the last one's given 12 cities, and they're given both a house to live in and pasture land to raise livestock in. Now let me ask you a question. Why do you think they need pasture land to raise livestock if all of their food is provided through the temple? Does anybody know the answer to this? This is kind of a quiz here. Let's see the savvy ones in the room. To what? To give back to who? Yeah, that's it. Exactly. In the Levitical priesthood, the Levites had to make sacrifices for their own sins. Well, you can't borrow somebody else's from the altar. They had to raise their own crops. They had to raise their own livestock, because when they had to make a sacrifice, they needed to choose the best from their flocks to give to the Lord. So priests had to do this as well. So chapter 21 is about priests getting some land, getting a place to live, and it's amongst the Israelites. Because this really needed to be spread out. The Levites didn't want to be just in one little spot. Their influence needed to be throughout the nation of Israel. So they get cities all throughout the nation. So they live there, they have a little bit of land, they can raise some cattle, make their sacrifices and such. And if you get down to 21, there's like a closing remark here. Look at 21:43. It says, so the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give their ancestors, and they took possession of it and they settled there. The Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their ancestors. Not one of their enemies withstood them. The Lord gave all their enemies into their hands. Not one of all the Lord's good promises to Israel failed. Every one was fulfilled. So what we have here basically is the Lord telling Israel, writing down here that, listen, we're finally settled in. The bags are beginning to get unpacked. We're beginning to hang stuff on the walls. This is where we're going to live now. We're getting rest here. We've finally settled in. Okay? So, that's going to be hard to do. Because look at chapter 22. This is where I call this crisis averted in 22. Then Joshua summoned the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh. And he said to them, "You have done all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded, and you have obeyed me in everything I commanded. For a long time now, to this very day, you have not deserted your fellow Israelites, but have carried out the mission the Lord your God gave you. Now that the Lord your God has given them rest as he promised, return to your homes in the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you on the other side of the Jordan. But be very careful to keep the commandment and the law that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you, to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to keep his commands, to hold fast to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul." So chapter 22 is this. Everything's settled in. Everybody's got their land. The Levites have their cities. We have the cities of refuge established. Now we have three tribes. Half the tribe of Manasseh, Gad, and the Reubenites. Remember, their land is on the east side of the Jordan. Okay, we're on the west side right now. Theirs is on the east side of the Jordan. So Joshua looks at them and says, "Hey, listen, guys, it's time for you guys to go home. You can take your stuff. I just want to say thank you. You've done a great job. You were faithful to what you said you were going to do. And so now you guys can go back and settle that land on the east side of the Jordan." Because remember, when they were with Moses early on, they said, "Hey, can we have this land on the east side? This is really, really nice." And God really makes the exception and says, "Sure, if you want this land, it's fine. You just have to fight the rest of the fight. Then you can go back." So that's what chapter 22 is. And it goes on. Joshua says, "Then Joshua blessed them, sent them away, and they went to their homes." And then you scroll down to verse 8. He says, "Return to your homes with your great wealth, with large herds of livestock, with silver, gold, bronze, iron, a great quantity of clothing, and divide the plunder from your enemies with your fellow Israelites." So the Reubenites and the Gadites and half the tribe of Manasseh left the Israelites at Shiloh. And so this big group takes off. They grab their stuff, they got their gear, they got their loot, big bags of gold and, their Armani suits, and they go back to their homeland. And so it seems like there's like a ticker tape parade. There they go. Thank you. Thank you for all the help. Everybody's great. Everybody's doing well. And then something happens. Here we go, second half of verse 9. Oh, I'm sorry, verse 10. So it says, "Their own land that they had acquired in accordance with the command of the Lord through Moses." Verse 10. "When they came to Gilead, near the Jordan, in the land of Canaan, the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh built an imposing altar there by the Jordan." So, as they're traveling back, they get to the Jordan, and before they cross the Jordan River, they're right there at the Jordan, right before they cross it, they come up with an idea. They said, "Hey, you know what we ought to do? Before we cross the Jordan, we should build an altar. We'll make it look just like the altar in the tabernacle, and we're going to make this thing huge. We're going to make it massive. We're going to make it like a cell tower." Anybody seen a cell tower along the landscape in a mountain range, right? It's like, they're huge. I was looking at one. We were on jet boats on the Rogue River a while back, and if you're going down the river, you can see this beautiful landscape of the mountains, and you can see the trees. The trees kind of match the mountain range and stuff like that, except there's one mountain where you look, and right at the very top, there's like this tree that shoots up like it's 60 feet higher than the other trees, and you can see it from like forever. You're like, "That's really weird. What's that?" That's a tower. That's a cell tower that they made to look like a tree. Anybody know what I'm talking about here? So you can see it from everywhere. Well, that's kind of what this thing was. They built this huge thing that everybody can see from everywhere. And it was a replica of the altar that was in the tabernacle way, way back where they left from. This was a good idea to them. They're like, "Yeah, let's do this." And so they built it. Now, Israel, the rest of the people, they freak out. The rest of the tribes freak out. Take a look here, verse 11. "And when the Israelites heard that they had built the altar on the border of Canaan at Gilead near the Jordan on the Israelite side, the whole assembly of Israel gathered at Shiloh to go to war against them." So when they hear about this huge altar that was built, they freak out. They're like, they did what? They did what? I mean, we're still cleaning up the confetti from the parade. They did what? Oh yeah, you hear about it? They built a huge altar. It goes up to the sky. And it is a replica of the town. They did what? Everybody. So yeah, they just washed off their swords from blood, right? Everyone, this is what we do. We go to war. Everyone grab your stuff. We're going to go to Shiloh. We're going to go kill Manasseh, Gad, and the Reubenites. We're going to go kill our brothers. I can't believe they did that. Look at that big old thing they built up. It's crazy. Now, I don't suppose there's anybody here like me that can be a bit impulsive. Right? See, if all you know is war, all you know how to do is fight. If all you know is war, all you'll know to do is fight. It's like the old adage, if you're a hammer, everything you see is a what? It's a nail. Something happens, freaks you out, let's go to war. We got to fight. And so they go to Bear, and they're going to go down to Shiloh. They're going to destroy family. That's what we're talking about here. The people they were just praising not more than 3 or 4 verses ago, they're going to go kill them. Well, let's get to verse, let's go to verse 11, or 12, 13. So the Israelites sent Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, to the land of Gilead, to Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. And with him they sent 10 of the chief men, one from each of the tribes of Israel, each the head of a family division among the Israelite clans. And then they went to Gilead. They went to Reuben and Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh. And they said to them, so what happens is they put together a delegation. I think somewhere along the way they said, hey, let's send a group to go talk to them. Let's go find out what's going on, but we're going to go to war. So they go and they show up and they talk to these 3 tribes. And here's what they say, verse 16. They said, the whole assembly of the Lord says this. So everybody's saying this, right? How could you break faith with the God of Israel like this? How could you turn away from the Lord and build yourself an altar in rebellion against him now? Was not the sin of Peor enough for us? Up to this very day we have not cleansed ourselves from that sin. Even though a plague fell on the community to the Lord. Are you now turning away from the Lord? Is that what you're doing? Listen, here's what they say. How dare you? How dare you do this? How could you even possibly even think about doing such a thing? Oh, they go on. If you rebel against the Lord today, tomorrow he will be angry with the whole community of Israel. If the land you possess is defiled, well, come over to the Lord's land where the Lord's tabernacle stands and share the land with us. But do not rebel against the Lord or against us by building an altar for yourselves. Listen to what he said. He said, listen, if you're going to rebel, you're going to rebel against the Lord. You're not just rebelling against the Lord. You know who you're rebelling against? You're rebelling against us. You're rebelling against me. You're rebelling against God. You're rebelling against me. And guess what? This is going to affect everybody. You're ruining everything. You're ruining everything by doing this. Goes on, when the sin of Achan, Zerah was unfaithful in regard to the devoted things, did not wrath come on the whole community of Israel? He was not the only one who died for his sin. So what happens is this delegation comes, and do they come looking for information? Do they come looking for understanding? They come in and they just rail them. We're gonna kill you. But before we kill you, we want to know why we're going to kill you. And this is what you've done. You've rebelled against God. How dare you do such a thing to all of us? We're all going to get in trouble now. I mean, this whole thing is just they are right at their throat. How can you turn your back on God? You're breaking faith, etc., etc., etc. Well, listen to what the Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh reply here. They say, the mighty one God the Lord. The mighty one God the Lord. He knows. Let me translate that in regular English. Oh my God. Oh my God. Are you serious? That's the Hebrew there. Christians translated it and messed the whole thing up. So that's what it says on. Let Israel know this. If this had been in rebellion or disobedience to the Lord, do not spare us this day. If we had built our own altar to turn away from the Lord and to offer burnt offerings and grain offerings or to sacrifice fellowship offerings on it, may the Lord himself call us to account. No! That's not what we did. We did it for fear that someday your descendants might say to ours, what do you have to do with the Lord, the God of Israel? The Lord has made the Jordan a boundary between us and you Reubenites and you Gadites. You have no share in the Lord, so your descendants might cause ours to stop fearing the Lord. So what side of the Jordan are they living on? The east side of the Jordan, right? So they're living on the east side of the Jordan. Well, everybody else that's in the club lives on what side of the Jordan? The west side of the Jordan. Their fear is that maybe not this generation, but a few generations from now, people will see the Jordan as the boundary and say, wait a minute, everybody on the west side of the Jordan is really part of the club. You few out there on the east side, you don't have any part of this. So we built something to act as a reminder. Take a look here. That is why we said, let us get ready and build an altar, but not for burnt offerings or sacrifices. On the contrary, it is to be a witness between us and you and the generations that follow, that we will worship the Lord at his sanctuary with our burnt offerings, our sacrifices, and our fellowship offerings. Then in the future, your descendants will not be able to say to ours, you have no share in the Lord. And we said, if they ever say this to us or to our descendants, we'll just look and answer them and we'll say, hey, look at the replica of the Lord's altar which our ancestors built. Not for burnt offerings or sacrifices, but just as a witness between us and you. Far be it from us to rebel against the Lord and turn away from him today by building an altar for burnt offerings, grain offerings, and sacrifices, other than the altar of the Lord our God that stands before his tabernacle. So what they say is that, listen, that is not what happened here. What we built was to act as a reminder for all of us that though we may be on the other side of the Jordan, our hearts are with you. And that's why we made it look like the altar and the tabernacle, to remind our children that we worship on the other side of the Jordan. That our hearts are on the other side of the Jordan. We just live here, but this reminds us that we go to the tabernacle to worship God. And that your children will look at it and be reminded that the people on the east side of the Jordan, they're just like us. And that we worship the same God. That's what this is about. That seems pretty reasonable. Well, take a look here. When Phinehas the priest and the leaders of the community, the heads of the clans of the Israelites, heard that Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh had to say, they were, what's it say there at the end of 30? They were what? Anybody have that open there? They were pleased. Whew. And Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, said to Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, today we know that the Lord is with us. Why is that? Because you have not been unfaithful to the Lord in this matter. Now you have rescued the Israelites from the Lord's hands. Why do you think he said that he rescued the Israelites from the Lord's hand? Why does he say that there? Because had they gone to war, what would have happened? God would have stepped in. God would have stepped in against the Israelites, saying, hey, you got this all wrong. You got this all wrong. Phinehas is like, thank you, thank you, thank you. We almost did something really dumb. Thank you. And so it says here, then Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, and the leaders returned to Canaan from their meeting with the Reubenites, the Gadites in Gilead, and reported to the Israelites. And they were glad to hear the report, and they praised God. And they talked no more about going to war against them to devastate the country where the Reubenites and the Gadites lived. And the Reubenites and the Gadites gave the altar this name. This is so great. They gave the altar the name, a witness between us that the Lord is God. This altar has taken on a fresh name. This altar is a witness to say that between us we get to see God. What happened here is a sign that God is with us. I want to take some time this morning. I want to talk about, as I shared earlier, how do we deal with rough patches when it comes to people we love? I think there's some great tips in chapter 22 here that I want to bring out this morning, because I think all of us have these situations that come up, especially people that are close to us. You know, it's one thing to yell at the guy at the roundabout that's being quirky, you know what I mean? It's quite another thing to have family, friends that we're struggling with. So I want to bring up a few things here. Number one, struggles are part of every healthy relationship. Okay? I want you to turn to the person next to you and just tell them, it's okay if we fight. Just tell them right now. Tell them it's okay if we fight. It's okay if we fight. So the thing is that it's okay to fight. In fact, let me say it like this. I don't know if you love me until you're willing to fight with me. I don't know. Whoa, now let's all not get all excited about that. Some of you are too quick to love, all right? But it is true. And I want to say that not just in families and friendships, but I want to talk about it here in this place. Sometimes we can be so congenial and so everybody's loving and everybody's getting along that we think, well, the last thing we want is to have anything that rocks the boat. Let me tell you something. Rocking the boat is a healthy part of any relationship and part of any family. Now, I don't think any of us have to create a crisis. They'll come pretty naturally. But it's healthy. It's healthy for every relationship. I had a couple come up to me a while back and say, Mike, we've been married 24, 25 years, and we've never had one fight. And I thought to myself, well, that's awesome. I don't know who the doormat is between the two of them, but it seems to work. Here's the thing. It's okay. Now, I know some of us are terrified at that. We're terrified at fighting. We're terrified at conflict. It just does something to us. Some of us grew up in homes where there was so much dysfunctional fighting, so much hurt and heartache that even the idea of fighting, we just cringe. We would rather have ourselves torn in half than to ruffle anybody's feathers. There's others of us that thrive in the fighting. Like if there's not a fight, we're just bored and we got to go fight something, you know what I mean? We're either fighting Obama or we're fighting a kid or whatever, you know, I don't know. But whatever it is, we just, and then there's a lot of us that we fall in between the two, right? But the fact is that every relationship, you're going to hit a spot, a healthy relationship, where there's going to be a patch where grace, mercy, and forgiveness are going to be the core foundation of your relationship. In fact, let me just say this. If your relationships are based upon happiness, it's just a matter of time before the foundation's taken out from underneath you. Grace, mercy, forgiveness. Those are the pillars of a godly relationship. So, how does this work in chapter 22 here? Well, let me give you just a few tips that come out of this. Okay, first one is this. If we understand that we're going to have struggles, there is a healthy way of doing this. And there's some warnings along the way. First warning would be this. Assumptions can be devastating. Remember what Phineas said. Had we acted on this, we would have died. Now, I love to tell you that every time I have an assumption, I've never acted on it. But I have. Have you? Assumed something and acted on it only to realize that you were mistaken. It was not like what you thought. They didn't do it for the reasons you thought. They didn't say what you thought they said. They didn't do what you thought they did. You know, there have been times where I would have bet the farm on something and I would have lost the farm. There's some reasons why we assume. Okay, or ways we do it. Number one, and we call it projection. Okay, projection is really, I think this is probably the most common one, and I'll speak for myself here. I think this is the most common one for me. So if Ashley and I are having theoretically a disagreement, hypothetically, if it were to ever happen, that was a joke, that does happen. So we have this. So if she says something to me and what she says to me kind of hurts a bit, the reason it hurts is because I listen and I say, if I was her and I said what she said, this is what I would have meant by it. And so that must mean when she said it, that's what she meant. So I'm going to respond. Do you understand what I'm saying here? So what I did was I assumed that I know what's going on in her and that whatever she said was the exact reason why I would say that. Okay? Let me just say something really clearly here. Men and women are so vastly different that the moment you think you have common ground is where you're already sinking in the sand. Okay? You're already sinking in the sand. This is projection. We do it with people all the time. We measure up people all the time by thinking, well, if I were them, then they did X, and so that must mean that, because that's what I would have meant if I did that. We even do this with God. How can God be loving and kind if there's so much this in the world? Because if I was God and I was loving and kind, I wouldn't allow this to happen. So in our projection, we have assumptions about things, only to find out that, guess what? Do you know who else is like you? Nobody is like you. Now, does that mean you can't have common experiences, common feelings? Sure you can. Okay? That's why we can sit in a room and appreciate a common teaching. But to try to gain people's motives because that's the way you would have done it, that's dangerous, dangerous ground to walk on. And more times than not, it'll burn you. Okay? Secondly, when we do assumptions, we also have to deal with the fact that we have unresolved hurts. Sometimes people have hurt us in the past, and with that hurt, we become flinchy in the present, and somebody does something, we automatically assume that, that what they're going to do or what they did, we connect it back here. Okay? So for example, we call this like PTSD. But I'm not talking in the military sense, I'm talking just in a social sense. We've been wounded in the past, something came out of left field and hit us, and when it hit us, now we're flinchy. So when we even sense something's happening over here, we already assume that this is going to be the end result. So I'll tell you, it's like, for example, for me, okay, and I've shared this before. I've had enough people over 20 years of ministry that I've had people call me and ask me to coffee, only to realize that it was not about wanting to have coffee with me, it was wanting to, like, thrash me. To where I'll sometimes have somebody call and say, hey, you want to go grab some coffee? No. I don't want coffee. Someone will ask me to have coffee and I'll say, well, is there something we need to talk about? Because I want to talk about it now. I don't want to go have coffee. Okay? Do you understand what I mean? Now does that have anything to do with the other person? No. What it has to do what? I've just got some unresolved stuff back here and I get flinchy. We do that in our own personal life. We've been rejected or abandoned by people that we trusted, and we'll be in a current relationship and something will just smell a little fishy and we'll already assume, oh, it's going to happen. They're going to do something. They're going to bolt. And so we just start making decisions based upon what we assume is going to happen in the future. Okay? The third time we start making assumptions is we're just emotionally clouded. We're just in trauma. And when we're in trauma, with all that emotion, we just begin to think the worst of things. We're like this a lot. I've shared with you last week, so I'm on this Whole30 diet with my wife, and there's a great acronym. If you don't have this, you should write this down somewhere. At least I would if I were you. It's HALT, HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I want to add one more to that. It's like 2 H's. Hungry, hot, angry, lonely, tired. Okay? Hungry, hot, angry, lonely, tired. That whatever I'm about to do, I should halt. Because I'm emotionally in a place where I'm assuming things, or my worldview is just not exactly correct. The big H for me right now has been hungry. And I know that because every time I approach a roundabout, I just feel like I'm approaching a group of idiots. That's how I feel. Anybody know what I'm talking about? I'm just like, uh-oh. know, it's a roundabout. I'm approaching a group of idiots. Now, let me tell you something. You know whose fault that is? That's mine. That's my problem. Because I'm sure there's somebody right behind me. I'm in the group. I'm in the group. But see, these are what assumptions can do. The Israelites heard what had happened with that tower, and they assumed they knew the reason why they did it. They assumed that they were going back to a Canaanite culture, a Canaanite way of thinking, and that wasn't the case at all. But they just assumed it, and they were going to go to war. They were going to kill them over something that they assumed to be true. I don't have a book, chapter, and verse on this, but there are certain things that I've heard in my life that I take almost as biblical. This is one of them. Take what you like and leave the rest, is what we say here. Here it is. He who walks in another man's mind is lost. He who walks in another man's mind is lost. And let me just say this, especially if we're talking about the opposite sex. He who walks in another man's mind is lost. You do not know what another person's thinking. All right, second thing we can get, some tips from chapter 22. Communication is vital to the goal of reconciliation. I want to make sure that we underline the word, the goal is what? Reconciliation. What's that mean to you? When I say reconciliation, what's that word mean? Okay, I heard the word get along. What else does reconciliation mean to you? What's that?
Common ground.
Okay, some common ground. Good. What else? Renew the relationship. Good. What else? Momentary truths. Okay, that's a little too honest. We're not ready for that yet. What else? To come back stronger. What's that? Working together. Okay. I know when I've reconciled with somebody because for me, I want the best for them. Reconciliation doesn't mean that the relationship's going to be the same as it was before. Those things can change. But reconciliation means I have their best in mind. So if Scott and I are having an issue, if we're going to reconcile with Scott, it doesn't mean the relationship's going to be the same as it was, but I want the best for him. It's not enough just not to fight. Some people think reconciliation is about, well, we're just not fighting anymore. That doesn't mean you're reconciled. Some people say, well, yeah, our relationship's great. We moved 500 miles away from each other and now we're great. Well, you didn't reconcile anything. You'll know it because when you get back in the room, it all comes up again, right? You feel it. Or you bump in, you see them in Walmart and you go and you, oh, I didn't see you. Yeah, you saw me from two. What do you mean? We were standing right behind you. Yeah, oh, yeah. See, there it is. So reconciliation is the goal here. So here's the thing. If you're not interested in reconciliation, I don't suggest starting the communication process. Because you know what most people want to do with communication? The goal is retribution, not reconciliation. I'm here to give you a piece of my mind. Oh, I'm going to call. I'm going to tell you exactly what. That's what we get from chapter 22 when that delegation showed up, right? I didn't get much of a sense they wanted reconciliation. They just wanted to tell them where their place was. Listen, communication, the tongue, is about bringing healing. It's not meant to be used as a sword, or as James says, a spark that starts a fire. It's meant to be something that blesses. So in this, we're looking for reconciliation. How do we do that? Number one, affirm our common heart and purpose. So Scott, I'm just going to pick on you for a bit. So let's say Scott and I are having, let's say he said something and it hurt my feelings. Okay, he did something and it hurt me. Okay, first thing I got to do is I got to make sure, okay, God, so am I wanting to reconcile this relationship right now, or am I just still so torqued that I've got some pride stuff that I need to work out? Sometimes I got some pride stuff. But once I get to a place like, no, you know what? It's a time I need to reconcile this relationship with Scott. So I'm going to call Scott. Hey, Scott, can we grab a coffee? And Scott's like, yeah, man, I love coffee. And so I'm like, hey, let's talk. And so we go. Now, what I want to do is I want to go to him. I say, Scott, before we even get started, because we got to get through the small talk, right? Hey, how's it going? How are the kids? How's the weather? How's your football team? Yeah, fantasy football. Yeah. All right. So, hey, man, here's what I want to talk about. I want to say first and foremost that I'm for you. And I believe in you, and I value our friendship. That I truly believe that whatever we're going to talk about now, I just want you to know that I believe God can make our friendship stronger through this. And that's my heart with what I want to share. And I believe in you, and no matter what happens at the end of this, there's nothing that can shake my desire to want to be your friend forever. Let me ask you a question. If somebody had a problem with you and they approached you like that first, what would you feel? You're going to lower your defenses? Good. What else? You'd want to listen to that, right? You know that the person across from you is not your enemy. But we have common ground here. We have common heart here. And I just want him to know this. And I want to make, because here's the thing. The enemy has a way, the devil has a way of putting issues into people's lives, and those issues drag us off the turf of our common ground, and we begin to deal with an issue at the expense of our relationship. We want to deal with an issue over here, but we don't want to but the relationship is being wounded dramatically as we're trying to fix a problem. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I mean, we're trying to argue an issue, and we want to be right about an issue, but we're not even really concerned about where the relationship's going to end up at the end of this thing. We're like the Tasmanian devil. We're just like, and by the time we're all exhausted, we're like, and we have shrapnel all around us. And the anger's just overtaken us, and we're just like, so I want to share with you this morning, first thing is, the issue isn't the issue. Okay, this is this thing over here. Okay, we'll deal with that. But this is the thing this is the thing that I want to make sure we're talking about, right? We get this down, this isn't so big. This becomes something pretty minor. This is the big thing we want to work on. Does it make sense what I'm saying here? This works in marriages. This works in friendships. This even works in the workplace. You say, well, Mike, my boss isn't a believer. It doesn't matter. You go up to him and say, hey, Scott's my boss. Hey, Scott, you know what? You know I want the best for you. I believe in this company. I believe in you. And I'm here to support you, build you up, and be whoever you need me to be in this company. You say that to your employer will be like, hey, what's up? This principle works because it's a God-given principle, and God's in everybody's life to whatever degree. So the first thing is I've got to establish that. And once I do that, then I take this issue and I'm dragging it onto the turf of my core values. I'm dragging the issue onto the turf of where God resides. God's not interested in issues. How many of you have come to believe that? God's interested in relationships. He can really give a rip about politics and all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, but I don't believe that. I think he's interested in relationships that we have with one another and ultimately with Him. This stuff here is just minor. But once we deal with it, we bring it back here, and then we can begin to talk about it. Second thing, we communicate clearly our struggle. So if I'm with Scott and I say, okay, so we got that established. Here's the thing, man. I'm really feeling, Scott, that when you took your gun and shot me in the shoulder, that hurt. That hurt. And of course I'm being ridiculous, but you get the drift, right? Is that this is what I'm feeling in our relationship. I'm feeling like there's something here. There's something that we're struggling with. I'm feeling distant. I'm feeling like you're angry with me, that I'm not measuring up something. You've got something going on with me. This is what I'm feeling. And then you're quiet. Another way to put it is, this is what I'm struggling with right now. Because maybe it's not towards them, maybe it's you towards them. Maybe not them towards you, but you towards them. I'm really struggling with this right now, Scott, because I'm tired of you shooting at me. Because it hurts. But I'm really struggling with this to be your friend if you keep shooting me with a gun. And so he's going to be like, oh, and then I'm going to be quiet. Now, I want to give you a trick here, okay? This is a real easy trick. You want to see a trick? This is a group dynamic trick, okay? So what you do. You're having a coffee, you're at someone's house, you have a glass of water, okay? It's always good to have a cup in your hand because it does create a social dynamic here. This is not manipulation, it just works all the time. This is why we offer coffee, by the way, in the back. It's not just for the coffee, it's that men like to hide behind cups. You see them all the time. They go grab a cup of coffee, and then they talk, I'm hiding behind my cup. Try it sometime. Take a guy and he doesn't have anything in his hands, he's freaking out. Okay, he's got to hide behind a cup. So, you have your cup of coffee, it's really simple here. Say, man, I'm really struggling with you keep shooting me with that gun. So I just wanted to share my heart with you about that. And then I'm just going to take a drink. There is a social thing that happens when you take a drink. You're passing the baton to another person. Try it. You're not believe it's totally true though. You're passing the baton to another person and you're asking them in that drink, it's real simple, it's non-verbal communication that he's going to respond. And you're just going to listen. Because Scott may say, well, Mike, I'm really sorry, man. I thought when you had that black mask over your face and you were in my house at 2 o'clock in the morning, I didn't know it was you. You know, and I didn't really appreciate the fact you had my flat screen TV on your back as you were walking out. Well, you just told me it didn't work and I was going to take it to my house and fix it. And so, you understand what I'm saying? This whole thing is going on. So as we begin talking like this, now we're talking back and forth, but guess what's happening here? We are moving towards unity. We're moving towards unity. We're listening. Don't cut a person off. Listen to them all the way through. I know somebody say, but Mike, I know why they did what they did. They always do this, and I know it. I'm not even going to listen to that. Well, okay. You very well could be wrong, though. See, the thing is, it's like Barney Fife. He used to have an old adage, and I'm really dating myself on these characters, right? Barney Fife. Barney Fife says this, hey, my mind's made up, don't confuse me with the facts. Listening is about allowing the story to change in your heart. It's learning to bring empathy to a story, empathy into the room. So, oh, I get that. My stepmother punched me up pretty bad one day. I was 11 years old. Hated her for it. Hated her for it and hated my dad that he allowed it to happen. I was about 22, 23 years old when I finally got around to wanting to reconcile. I didn't know she was beat up by her dad. And I also didn't know, because when you're 11 years old, you don't know about all the medical problems that women go through at that age and all the stuff she was dealing with. Or the fact that she took in 2 teenage boys that weren't her own. And we weren't the easiest teenage boys at all. Am I justifying bad behavior? Absolutely not. She took responsibility. But it's amazing when we search for unity and we bring empathy into the story, we realize that, you know what? Hurting people hurt hurting people. You know what I mean? So we bring this into the room, into the conversation. That's why we listen. We listen. Letter D, let love and peace win. Let love and peace win. Like, but Mike, they're still putting the silverware in the wrong place in the dishwasher. Yeah, okay. Well, you can be right or you can be happy, but you can't be both. Can't be both. Sometimes you got to ask the question, what is this really about? And to be honest with me, sometimes I just don't like people telling me what to do. I just don't like it. But usually what they tell me to do is normally for my best. And sometimes I have to divert my plans a little bit. Like if I want to go to Home Depot, but we want to go shopping first, I have to accept the fact that we'll probably never make it to Home Depot. Maybe. Listen, I've had plenty enough in my life to do things alone. Right? For a lot of the stuff we fight about, let's be honest, let me put it like this. I was listening to a guy on the radio. He was calling Dr. Laura. Maybe some of you know Dr. Laura. I don't listen to her very often, but there was a thing that came up, and it was a story about a man whose wife kept leaving the cabinet doors open, drawers, all the time. And he talked to her 100 times about shutting those things, and it was bothering him to no end. He talked to her, and she would promise, and she kept doing it. And so he didn't know what else to do. So he called this talk radio gal and said, I'm gonna leave my wife because she can't shut the cabinet doors. Okay? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Okay, so did any of you call? So anyways, so Dr. Laura's great. She says to her, well, you know, and if you know anything about Dr. Laura, she normally will listen to the point where you can hear the gun loading in the background. She's about to blast you. And this was really great because I didn't hear any of that. She listened. She was like, She says, oh, hey, sir, I got a great solution for that. And he's like, really? I'm all ears. What's up? Well, you know, you're not going to have to deal with that forever. Really? What can we do? Well, she'll die someday. She's like, what? Oh yeah, she's gonna die someday. And when she dies, every door that you close will stay shut. And when she's dead, every drawer that you kept closed will stay closed. And everywhere you put the forks, they'll be there when you get home. Every towel you fold will be on the shelf. And it'll be just the way you want it. When she's dead. So by this time I'm pulled over because I'm just like, because I'm rallying for this guy. Yeah! You know? I'm like, man. And she said one of the greatest things. This was such an attitude shift for me. She said, listen, maybe instead of looking at the door and the drawers as some sort of burden you got to bear every day, maybe look at it as a reminder that she's still around. That every time you shut a door or a drawer, you can shut it and thank God that she's still there. And she's still putting up with all your junk. Friends, being right is way overrated. Let love and peace win. Your actions, after all of this, whatever you decide to do, are now yours and yours alone to own. You know, some friendships, they evolve into all kinds of things. And some of them, they were close and then they go away. And sometimes things change. That's okay. It's okay. But whatever you choose to do, it's your choice. You own it. If you want to be a friend, then be a friend. If you don't want to be, then that's fine. But those are your choices to own. So own them. And I just love at the end here, that end of that chapter, I don't think it's by chance, they end the chapter with, the Lord is God. You know, the way we do friendships and relationships here at the church, I hope bear witness to the fact that the Lord, He's God in this place. That the Lord's here. Even in the midst of our fighting. Amen? All right, let's stand together and let's pray this morning. So Father, we thank you. Lord, this is real deal stuff. Lord, I don't imagine there's a single one of us that doesn't have somebody that in our life that we're struggling with right now. A family member, a friend. Somebody that's hurt us. Somebody that just doesn't understand. And God, I suppose it'd be really simple to just amputate them from our life and never call, never write, never try to avoid them. Go to another church. Don't go to the Christmas dinner. Whatever it's going to be. But our hearts aren't right. And the resentments, they chew on us. And Lord, you just love us way too much to live like, you love us way too much to live like that. Lord, help us to be the first one to move. The first one to take a step towards reconciliation. Understanding and believing that love is always better than war. But we have to fight for it. We're going to have to humble our hearts to receive it. God, I know that a lot of times we think we're always right. But it's not enough to be right. We need more. We need grace. We need forgiveness. We need love. So Lord, let it start with us. Let it start with our hearts. And then, Lord, let us reach out to those people that we've been avoiding over the last who knows how many months, years, decades. Just to clear the air. So God, again, we love you. We thank you. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. So...